The morning air felt lighter than it had in years. The girl stepped out of the safe house, taking slow, deliberate breaths, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. Everything seemed sharper, clearer, as if the world itself had shifted overnight. She walked carefully, but with a newfound confidence, knowing she was no longer alone. The bikers had remained nearby, silent guardians whose presence gave her strength without words. The town was stirring. People had begun to realize that the events of the past days had changed more than one life. Neighbors spoke quietly about courage and protection. Teachers reflected on their role in noticing the hidden struggles around them. And everywhere she looked, the girl saw curiosity, interest, and admiration. But she also noticed respect in the distance, the kind that said, "This is serious. This is important." It was a far cry from the fear that had filled her home for years. The bikers moved in coordinated groups, patrolling quietly near the safe house, ensuring that nothing could threaten her. They did not speak much. They didn't need to. Their actions spoke volumes. Each glance, each gesture, each subtle movement created a safety net around her, one that extended beyond walls or doors. She could finally feel it, protection that was constant, reliable, and unwavering. Meanwhile, the stepfather faced the consequences of his actions. Legal authorities had been informed of the situation, and investigations were underway. The bikers had provided evidence, timelines, and observations that made it clear the girl had been living in fear and needed protection. The stepfather's reputation in the town began to crumble as more details came to light. He tried to contact people he thought would support him, but he found doors closed, eyes wary, and trust lost. For the first time, he experienced the isolation and helplessness he had imposed on someone else for so long. The girl began the process of rebuilding her life. The bikers encouraged her to take small steps, simple routines, walks outside, attending classes with confidence, and reconnecting with friends. Each moment was a victory, each smile a triumph over years of fear. She learned that safety was not just the absence of danger, but the presence of support. The knowledge that she could reach out and find people who would protect her. The town, too, was beginning to understand the significance of what had happened. People spoke in hushed voices about the bikers' display, the girl's courage, and the importance of intervention. Parents discussed how to be more attentive. Teachers considered new ways to notice signs of distress, and students reflected on the courage it took to ask for help. What had started as a singular act of rescue had grown into a lesson for the entire community. The bikers had become quiet heroes. They did not seek recognition, applause, or fame. Their goal had never been attention. It had been the girl's safety. Yet their actions left a lasting impression. People who had witnessed the display, who had observed the precision and care, could not help but feel inspired. They had seen human compassion expressed in its most disciplined, deliberate, and powerful form. It was a reminder that courage could take many shapes, and sometimes protection came from the most unexpected places. The girl spent her days slowly regaining trust in the world. She went to school, joined small group activities, and reconnected with the counselor who had been her first support. Each day brought a little more confidence, a little more hope. She discovered that fear could exist, but it no longer had to control her. She realized that courage was not about ignoring fear, but about moving forward despite it. And she had seen courage displayed in a way she had never imagined, through people who risked their comfort, safety, and time to protect someone else. The stepfather, meanwhile, was facing legal scrutiny. The authorities had enough evidence to proceed, thanks in part to the bikers' careful documentation. Investigators reviewed reports, witness statements, and the movements of the bikers outside the school. The situation that had once been under his control was now entirely out of his hands. He could no longer intimidate, hide, or manipulate. Every action he took now carried consequences, and he felt the weight of accountability pressing down on him. The girl, despite the lingering memories of fear, began to dream. She imagined a life where she could walk freely without looking over her shoulder, where her home was a place of comfort rather than anxiety. She thought about the future with cautious excitement, envisioning opportunities to explore hobbies, make friends, and build confidence. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope, to believe that she could have a normal life, one where fear was no longer the primary force guiding her decisions. The bikers continued to support her, but they did so with discretion. They encouraged independence, knowing that true protection was not just about being physically present but about empowering her to make safe choices. They guided her through new routines, advised her on planning and caution, and reminded her that the courage she had shown by reaching out was already a powerful part of her strength. Community awareness grew as well. Parents who had watched the events unfold began talking about the importance of noticing signs of distress, being proactive, and valuing human life above appearances. Teachers considered new training and resources for students who might be struggling quietly. Even those who had initially questioned the bikers' methods began to see the wisdom and care in their actions. It became clear that sometimes extraordinary measures were necessary to protect those who could not protect themselves. The girl's life slowly regained balance. Each day she faced ordinary challenges, but she did so with the knowledge that she had allies, people who would stand by her if danger returned. The bikers remained in the background, observing quietly, ready to act if needed. Their presence was a silent reassurance, a constant reminder that protection and support could be unwavering and deliberate. The stepfather's influence continued to diminish. As investigations proceeded, he was confronted with the reality of his actions and the legal consequences awaiting him. Friends and acquaintances who had once supported or ignored him began to distance themselves. He experienced the isolation and fear he had inflicted on someone else, but now it was fully directed at himself. For the first time, he understood that fear could be wielded against him and that his control was no longer absolute. The girl, meanwhile, found joy in simple things. She laughed more freely, focused on schoolwork, and explored new hobbies. She began to form friendships based on trust and mutual respect. She realized that life could hold safety, care, and happiness, and that courage did not always require fighting but sometimes simply trusting, asking for help, and taking careful steps forward. The bikers, satisfied that she was secure, began to gradually reduce their visible presence. They remained within reach but allowed her to experience life with increasing independence. Their work was not over, but they had achieved the primary goal, ensuring her immediate safety and giving her the tools to reclaim her life. The girl had learned that help could come from unexpected places, that courage and compassion often intersected in extraordinary ways, and that trust could be rebuilt even after long periods of fear. Over time, the town embraced the lessons from the event. Community meetings discussed ways to identify and respond to abuse, and neighbors became more vigilant, empathetic, and supportive. The girl's story inspired conversations, education, and awareness, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond her immediate situation. Her courage and the bikers' dedication became a lesson in humanity, a story of hope, protection, and the power of intentional action. The girl continued to grow stronger, more confident, and more self-assured. She reflected often on the bikers' actions and the way strangers had risked time, comfort, and personal safety to protect her. It was a demonstration of humanity at its best, a reminder that ordinary people could perform extraordinary acts of courage and compassion when they acted together with purpose. The stepfather faced the consequences of his actions fully. Legal proceedings moved forward, backed by evidence and testimony. The community watched as accountability was enforced, and the girl saw that justice could be achieved. The fear that had dominated her life was replaced not just by protection but by a sense of closure, the understanding that the wrongs done to her were being addressed and could no longer continue. As weeks passed, the girl's life began to feel normal, though she carried the lessons of the past within her. She walked the streets with confidence, returned to school with renewed focus, and felt a sense of independence she had never known. The bikers remained symbols of courage and protection in her mind, proof that care, planning, and discipline could intersect to create real safety. They had shown her that life could change in a single day, and that extraordinary actions could come from the most unexpected places. Eventually, the bikers gradually left the area, their mission complete. But the impact of their actions stayed with the girl in the town. She had learned to trust, to be brave, and to recognize the power of community and compassion. The town had learned lessons about awareness, empathy, and the importance of stepping up when someone is in need. And the girl, once trapped by fear, had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her freedom. For the first time in years, she smiled without hesitation. She felt safe, strong, and hopeful. She had been seen, protected, and The town was still buzzing from what had happened outside the school. Parents and students had returned to their routines, but the memory of the bikers' performance lingered. Whispers filled classrooms, offices, and shops. People couldn't stop talking about the girl who had walked between 97 bikers. The silent, organized display that had been as much about courage as it had been about protection. Everyone felt the weight of it, even those who had only seen it from a distance. The girl sat quietly in the safe house the bikers had arranged, her hands folded in her lap, staring out the window. The world outside felt alive but different. It had shifted. The fear that had been constant, a shadow behind every thought, every movement, seemed a little smaller now. The bikers had shown her that she was not invisible. They had shown her that there were people who would act, not just for themselves, but for her. She felt a strange combination of relief and disbelief. How could so many people care about one girl they had never met? Meanwhile, the stepfather had discovered that his control was slipping. He had returned to the school, expecting a normal day, only to find students and teachers talking in hushed tones, some glancing anxiously out the windows. Rumors spread quickly, and soon he heard about the bikers' presence, their performance, and the girl's sudden disappearance. His face darkened as he realized that the situation was no longer under his command. Panic rose in his chest. He had underestimated the power of unity, underestimated the will of people who acted from the heart rather than fear. At the same time, the bikers were coordinating next steps. Some stayed with the girl, ensuring her immediate safety. Others contacted local authorities quietly, providing information that would help protect her and bring the stepfather's actions to light. They were careful. They did not want to create unnecessary conflict, but they also knew that the longer he remained unchecked, the greater the risk to the girl. Their strategy balanced caution with decisive action, proving that courage and planning could exist together. Inside the safe house, the girl began to speak more freely. She described the fear, the sleepless nights, the anxiety that had ruled her life. The bikers listened without judgment, without interruption, giving her the space to finally release what she had held inside for so long. Tears fell freely as she told her story. For the first time, someone was hearing every detail, truly understanding the weight she had carried. It was exhausting but also liberating. She realized that speaking out did not make her weak. It was the beginning of reclaiming her strength. Outside, the town began to stir with curiosity and concern. Neighbors who had watched the bikers' display were still processing the scene. Some questioned the legality of it, worried about the confrontation with the school or the stepfather. Others felt awe, admiration, and hope. The conversation shifted from fear to inspiration. People began to see that acts of courage could come from unexpected places, that ordinary citizens could create extraordinary protection through unity and purpose. The stepfather, increasingly desperate, began to seek answers. He contacted colleagues, friends, and even local officials trying to track the girl's movements. But every effort was met with silence or careful deflection. The bikers had coordinated with the authorities to ensure that any attempts to reach the girl would fail. They were thorough, professional, and unwavering. Every move was calculated to prevent harm while maximizing protection. For the first time, the stepfather experienced uncertainty and fear. The control he had relied on was gone, replaced by a force he could neither predict nor confront. Meanwhile, the girl began to notice small signs of normalcy returning to her thoughts. She could focus on small details, like the way sunlight streamed through the curtains or the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. She laughed softly at things that would have seemed trivial before. The bikers encouraged these moments, understanding that rebuilding trust and confidence required patience and attention to the ordinary joys of life. They helped her feel grounded, reminding her that safety was not just physical but emotional as well. Back at the school, teachers and students continued to discuss the day's events. Some were inspired, thinking about the courage it took for the girl to trust strangers, for the bikers to act on instinct and compassion. Others were shocked, realizing that the girl had been living in fear without anyone truly noticing. The community began to reflect on the importance of vigilance, empathy, and intervention. The performance had not only saved the girl, but had also shifted the town's awareness, encouraging people to see the invisible struggles around them. The stepfather, growing increasingly agitated, considered confronting the girl or the bikers directly. He imagined showing strength and reasserting control, But every time he thought about it, he hesitated. He had underestimated the unity and resolve of the bikers. He realized that this was no ordinary challenge. These people acted as one, with purpose and discipline. The realization filled him with unease. For the first time, he felt powerless against a force he could not predict. The bikers, understanding the psychological and strategic weight of their presence, remained visible near the town but at a safe distance. Their formation was deliberate, signaling to the stepfather and the town that protection was ongoing. They did not need to confront him physically. The knowledge of their discipline and presence alone was enough to deter any aggressive actions. Their message was clear: harm will not reach the girl while we are here. As the day wore on, the girl began to regain her confidence. The fear that had been a constant companion was now tempered by courage and trust. She began to plan small steps toward independence, guided by the bikers. They encouraged her to think about what she wanted, what safety meant, and how she could rebuild her life. These were small but powerful lessons. They reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. In the evening, the bikers gathered quietly to review the day's events. They discussed what had gone well, what could have been improved, and how to continue supporting the girl. Each rider shared observations, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. They were methodical, precise, and deeply committed. For them, this was not a one-time action, but a responsibility they had chosen to uphold. Their dedication extended beyond the moment of rescue. It was a commitment to care, to guidance, and to ensuring a lasting impact. The girl watched them, realizing the depth of their dedication. Each biker had sacrificed time, comfort, and certainty to protect someone they barely knew. It was an act of profound humanity. She felt a connection to these people that transcended words. Their presence had given her more than safety. It had given her hope, trust, and a vision of a world where courage and compassion could exist together. Back in town, the stepfather's frustration grew. He contacted acquaintances, trying to understand the sudden change. He realized that the authorities, the community, and even the bikers were united in their intention to protect the girl. He felt cornered, exposed, and powerless. For the first time, he had to confront the consequences of his actions. The fear that had dominated the girl's life for years now returned to him, though in a very different form. It was fear of accountability, fear of exposure, and fear of the unity of people acting with purpose. As night fell, the girl settled into the safe house. She reflected on the events of the day, feeling a sense of calm she had not experienced in years. The bikers continued their watch, some resting nearby, others patrolling silently. Their presence reminded her that protection was ongoing, that courage was steady, and that human kindness could be as powerful as it was unexpected. She allowed herself to sleep, knowing that for the first time she would wake up without the constant weight of fear pressing down on her. The community, too, began to change. Neighbors who had observed the events reflected on the importance of seeing what is often hidden. Teachers considered ways to be more attentive to their students' lives outside the classroom. Parents spoke about awareness, vigilance, and compassion. The bikers' actions had ripple effects far beyond the immediate rescue. They had sparked a broader reflection on empathy, courage, and the responsibility to protect the vulnerable. By morning, the girl felt stronger. She knew challenges still lay ahead, but she also knew she had allies. She began to plan small steps toward normal life, guided by the bikers and the counselor. Each moment was a lesson in resilience, courage, and trust. She had learned that even in the darkest circumstances, help could come from the most unexpected places, and that people could act with pure intent to protect and empower others. The stepfather, facing legal inquiries and community scrutiny, began to realize that his power was gone. The network of support surrounding the girl was impenetrable. He could no longer intimidate, control, or harm her. The bikers' presence, their planning, and their symbolic actions had ensured that justice, protection, and human compassion prevailed. The girl smiled softly for the first time in years. She had survived fear, found courage, and seen firsthand the extraordinary lengths ordinary people could go to protect someone in need. The bikers had not only rescued her physically but had shown her the meaning of human solidarity, the power of intentional action, and the beauty of courage expressed through care rather than violence. And as she looked out, the girl followed the bikers down a quiet alley, her heart still pounding from the rush of adrenaline but slowly calming as she realized the danger had passed. She glanced around, taking in their presence. There were 97 people here, all moving in perfect harmony. Some adjusted helmets, others glanced at radios or made small gestures to coordinate. Despite the numbers, nothing felt chaotic. It was precise, organized, and purposeful. The leader noticed her gaze and offered a reassuring smile. "You're safe now," he said softly. "We're going to show you something. Something that will make you understand that you are never alone." She blinked, unsure what he meant, but a spark of curiosity ignited in her chest. She had already felt relief in their presence, but now there was a sense of anticipation she couldn't name. The group led her to a large open space near the school, a wide parking lot bordered by trees and fences. It was quiet except for the distant hum of engines. One by one, the bikers lined up, forming rows with careful precision. They weren't just standing randomly. There was a pattern, a plan, something she could not yet comprehend. Her eyes widened as she took it all in. There were dozens of motorcycles gleaming under the morning sun, their riders standing beside them like silent guardians. The leader raised a hand, and the engines started. Not in a chaotic roar, but in a low, unified hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. It was powerful yet controlled, like the heartbeat of a living machine. The girl stepped back instinctively, amazed by the sound. She had never seen anything like this. It was intimidating and comforting at the same time. The vibration traveled through her chest, and she felt a strange sense of safety in the unity of their presence. Then, without warning, the bikers began to move in formation. Some shifted motorcycles into circles, others knelt beside their bikes, and a few raised their helmets high into the air. They held up signs with simple words written boldly: strength, courage, safety, freedom. Each sign was a message to her, a symbol of the protection and support surrounding her. She felt tears prick at her eyes. No one had ever shown her anything like this. No one had ever made her feel seen. The students and staff who had been watching from a distance were stunned. They whispered to each other, unsure what to make of the scene. Parents began to gather at the edges of the street, their curiosity and concern mounting. Cameras were pulled out, phones raised, but no one dared approach. The bikers' energy was intense but calm. It was clear that they had control, but they weren't there to fight. Their message was simple. The girl was protected and harm would not come near her. The girl's pulse quickened as she realized the depth of their effort. Each biker had chosen to be here, leaving their own lives for a moment to ensure hers would be safe. Each movement, each sign, each step was part of a plan designed to shield her from fear. She had been living in a cage of silence and anxiety, and now, in the middle of this quiet parking lot filled with strangers who cared, she began to understand what freedom might feel like. Some of the bikers formed a circle around her, their motorcycles turned off but positioned as barriers. They knelt, placing their helmets on the ground in a gesture of respect and protection. It was not aggressive, not threatening. It was symbolic, powerful, and deeply moving. The circle felt like a shield made of steel, human strength, and unwavering commitment. She stepped inside, feeling the warmth and power of their presence surround her. The leader knelt as well, directly in front of her. "You've been through a lot," he said softly. "But you are not alone anymore. You have people who care, people who will protect you. Today we want to show everyone that courage and protection can come from unexpected places." She looked up at him, her throat tight with emotion. For the first time in years, she felt a weight lift from her chest. She realized that she could trust these strangers, that they were here for her, and that she had a future that wasn't controlled by fear. The bikers then began a slow, deliberate movement. They walked their bikes in synchronized patterns, forming intricate shapes in the parking lot. Some moved forward, some backward. Others rotated in circles, creating a visual display that seemed choreographed like a performance. It was mesmerizing. Each turn, each shift, each alignment was precise, showing not just discipline but respect. It was as if they were sending a message to the world. She is under protection, and nothing will harm her while we are here. The girl watched in awe. She had expected action, perhaps speed or force, but this was something different. It was beauty, strength, and courage wrapped into one moment. She felt a connection to these people she had never imagined possible. They were not superheroes in the traditional sense, but their presence was heroic. They were human, yet powerful in a way that transcended ordinary protection. Onlookers could not believe what they were seeing. Teachers, parents, and students had never witnessed such a display. It was not violent, not chaotic, not loud in the usual sense. but it carried an emotional weight that stunned everyone. They saw dedication, discipline, and a commitment to safety and justice that was almost unreal. Whispers grew into murmurs, murmurs into quiet conversations. Cameras captured the moment, and even those who were skeptical or confused felt something change in the air. The bikers held their positions, some raising fists briefly in salute, others lowering them slowly, all synchronized in their movements. Every biker, every motion was a symbol of unity. The girl felt like she was standing at the center of something bigger than herself, something that proved that human kindness and bravery could take forms she had never imagined. Tears rolled down her cheeks unbidden, as she realized she had never felt seen, protected, or valued like this before. The leader stepped forward and spoke softly but clearly so she could hear. "This is a reminder," he said, "that you are strong, you are brave, and you are not alone. You have people who will always be here when you need them." The words resonated inside her, echoing louder than any fear she had carried. She nodded, too moved to speak. It was the first time she truly believed it. After several minutes, the bikers began to disperse slowly. They didn't leave completely. Some stayed nearby, still forming barriers, still watching. Others returned to their motorcycles but remained alert, ready for anything. The performance had been symbolic, yes, but it had also served as a shield, a protective measure to ensure she could move safely. She realized then that protection wasn't always about fighting or confrontation. Sometimes it was about presence, support, and intention. The girl's counselor stepped forward and took her hand, guiding her through the bikers' formation toward a nearby safe vehicle arranged to take her away. She glanced back, taking in the sight one last time. 97 bikers standing together, silent but powerful, had created a memory she would never forget. She felt their strength, their commitment, and their humanity. She realized that courage could come in many forms, and that it was often found in unexpected places. As she was driven away, the motorcycle started up again, engines low and controlled, leaving the parking lot with precision. The townspeople watched in awe, still whispering, still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. It was not a simple rescue. It was a statement, a demonstration of loyalty, protection, and human compassion that transcended words. The girl felt something shift inside her. Fear still lingered, of course, because fear cannot vanish in a single moment, but it had been replaced partially with trust. Trust in people who acted not for themselves but for her. Trust in the idea that she could finally have a life beyond fear. Trust in the knowledge that someone could care so deeply that they would put themselves at risk to protect a stranger. She looked out the window at the fading line of motorcycles disappearing down the street. A wave of gratitude and awe washed over her. This moment, this performance, had changed her perception of the world. It had shown her that heroism did not always come from power or authority, but from courage, unity, and the willingness to stand for someone else when it mattered most. Even as the vehicle carried her toward safety, she replayed every detail in her mind. The way the bikers moved, the signs they held, the synchronized gestures, the respect in their actions, it all felt like a gift, a message she would carry with her forever. She realized that this was more than a rescue. It was a moment of transformation. The girl who had walked quietly through life, hiding her fear and pain, had now seen the strength of community, the power of solidarity, and the extraordinary impact that ordinary people could make when they acted together with care and purpose. As the morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the town in golden light, the girl felt a small, steady flame of hope inside her. She did not know exactly what the future would hold, but she knew one thing. She had people watching over her now, people who would protect her, people who would make sure that she could finally live without fear, and in that knowledge she found the first true sense of freedom she had ever known. The bikers gathered in a quiet clearing just outside town before dawn. One by one, motorcycles rumbled to life, their engines low and steady, more like a heartbeat than a roar. The smell of gasoline mixed with the morning air. Everyone was focused, tense but calm. They didn't speak much. Words weren't needed. Each biker knew their role. Each knew what was at stake. They had spent days planning this, watching the girl's routines, mapping out the streets, and figuring out the safest way to reach her without anyone being hurt. The leader of the group, a tall man with a leather jacket marked with symbols of loyalty and protection, looked around at the faces in front of him. There were 97 riders, each one chosen for their reliability and courage. "Remember," he said softly, his voice carrying over the engine hum, "this isn't about anger. This isn't about revenge. We're here to protect. Keep calm, stay focused, and do exactly what we planned." His eyes scanned the group, making sure everyone understood. There was no hesitation. They had all faced danger before, but this was different. This wasn't about themselves. This was about a life that needed saving. As the sun began to rise, the bikers rolled toward the town. They didn't speed recklessly. They moved with precision. The rumble of engines echoed down the empty streets, and the occasional pedestrian or early driver paused, surprised at the sight of so many bikes moving in perfect formation. Some bikers waved at people passing by, but most kept their eyes ahead. They knew the most important thing was the girl waiting inside the school, unaware that a team was coming to rescue her. Inside the school, the girl felt an odd flutter in her chest. She couldn't explain it, but something felt different. Maybe it was the messages she had exchanged with the Guardian riders. Maybe it was the small spark of courage she felt the day before. She focused on her classes, tried to act normal, but her mind kept wandering. She imagined what it would be like to finally escape the fear, to breathe freely without worrying about what would happen when she got home. Meanwhile, the bikers had reached the outskirts of the school. They parked their motorcycles in a wide arc along the streets, leaving enough space for visibility but not blocking emergency access. Some dismounted and began checking radios. Others walked quietly along the perimeter, ensuring the area was secure. They weren't rushing. Rushing could alert the stepfather or put the girl in danger. They moved like shadows, organized and quiet, waiting for the right moment to act. Inside the counselor's office, the girl fidgeted nervously. She had been told not to panic, that the bikers would arrive in time to protect her, that everything was already in motion. Her hands shook as she clutched the edge of her chair. She had never felt this kind of anticipation before, not like it was now. Part of her wanted to run, to hide, to pretend she hadn't asked for help. But another part of her, the part that had been trapped and scared for so long, wanted to finally believe that someone was coming to take her out of danger. Outside, the leader gave a quiet signal. A small group of bikers moved closer to the school entrance, scouting for obstacles or anyone who might recognize them. They checked the street for parked cars, made sure the gates were clear, and coordinated their movements with the others through subtle gestures. Their goal was simple: to create a protective presence that would allow the girl to leave safely. They weren't there to fight anyone, not unless it was absolutely necessary. The plan was precision, not violence. The girl's stepfather was unaware of the movements outside. He went about his morning routine, distracted and arrogant, convinced that no one could see through his carefully constructed image of control. He didn't notice the soft vibrations of motorcycles on the distant street or the quiet communication among the riders. To him, the day was ordinary, routine, safe. He had no idea that the world was about to shift in ways he could never predict. At that moment, a teacher noticed the unusual sight outside the window. A line of motorcycles, engines turned off, gleaming in the morning sun, and figures moving purposefully around the perimeter. She frowned, unsure what to make of it. A few students gathered by the window, whispering to each other, their curiosity growing. No one could have guessed what was about to unfold. The bikers regrouped near the main entrance. Each rider checked their equipment, adjusted gloves, tightened helmets, and exchanged quick, encouraging nods. They were ready. The leader raised his hand, and in an almost silent motion, the bikers positioned themselves to enter. Their presence was a signal. They were not there to harm, but to protect. It was a strange kind of power, a silent authority that spoke louder than words. Inside, the girl felt her pulse quicken. The counselor told her to stay calm, to follow instructions, and to trust the plan. The door opened slightly, and a small note was slipped under it. "We are here, stay calm. Follow us." Her hands trembled as she picked it up. For a moment, she couldn't believe it. This was real. People were really coming for her. Real, strong, protective people who would make sure she was safe. The bikers' leader signaled, and a few of them entered the school quietly, keeping to the shadows, making sure no one else noticed their movements. They moved with care, their focus entirely on the girl's safety. The corridors were quiet except for the soft shuffle of boots and the occasional whisper. Their eyes were alert, scanning every corner, every doorway, every possible risk. They had done this before, but never with the same personal stakes. This time it was different. This time it was about saving a life that had been living in fear for too long. The girl was guided by the counselor to a back entrance, one that led to a quiet alley behind the school. She peeked through the window and saw them. A group of people she had never met before, but whose presence brought a strange mix of awe and comfort. 97 bikers, all waiting silently, their faces calm but alert. She couldn't help but feel a sense of security she had never felt before in her life. Her heart pounded, but she felt courage growing inside her. She had taken the first step by reaching out for help, and now she was about to take the next. The bikers opened a small gate, creating a clear path for her to walk through. Every step she took felt heavier than normal, yet lighter at the same time. She was walking toward freedom, toward a chance at life without fear. Outside, the motorcycles gleamed in the sun, lined up like soldiers ready for protection. The leader motioned for the girl to approach. She hesitated for only a moment, then stepped forward. The bikers parted slightly, creating a safe corridor. The street felt alive with their presence, but calm, reassuring, protective. She didn't feel alone anymore. People on the sidewalks paused to watch. They had never seen anything like this before. A girl walking calmly between dozens of bikers, not a fight, not chaos, but a strange and powerful display of solidarity. Whispers spread quickly. Parents grabbed their children, pointing, unsure what was happening. Students pressed against windows to get a better view. Everyone could feel the unusual energy in the air. The girl finally reached the leader. He knelt slightly, a gesture of respect, and held out a hand. She hesitated, then took it. The moment she did, a wave of relief washed over her. She had never imagined that protection could feel so real, so strong, so unconditional. The bikers moved around her, forming a shield that no one could penetrate. Their presence was a promise. No harm would come to her now. The leader spoke softly, almost like a whisper. "We're here. You are safe. Follow us and nothing will touch you." She nodded, unable to find words. Her steps became steadier, more confident. Each motorcycle engine, though quiet, seemed to pulse with strength and assurance. She walked down the street with them. Every glance, every movement, every subtle gesture designed to protect her and keep her calm. As they moved away from the school, a few onlookers tried to approach, asking questions, but the bikers kept the path clear. There was no anger in their actions, only authority, presence, and a determination that left no doubt. The girl's safety was their priority. The stepfather, unaware, would not have the chance to interfere. By the time the group disappeared from sight, the girl felt like she had stepped into a new life, one where fear no longer ruled. Even as they reached a safe location nearby, she realized that this day marked the beginning of something new. It was not just an escape from danger. It was the first time she had truly felt seen, truly protected, and truly cared for. The bikers, strangers only hours ago, had become a shield around her, a force she could rely on without question. For the first time in years, she let herself breathe deeply. The fear that had weighed on her chest every day began to lift, replaced by a cautious but undeniable sense of hope. She was not alone. She was not invisible. And the world, which had seemed so small and trapped just hours before, suddenly felt wider, freer, and filled with possibility. The girl walked down the quiet streets of her small town every morning, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes fixed on the pavement. To everyone around, she looked like any other teenager, blending into the crowd with her soft smile and polite nods. Teachers praised her for being attentive in class. Neighbors called her sweet and well-behaved. Even her classmates barely noticed her, except for the occasional wave or hello. But inside, she carried a storm of fear and sadness that no one could see. At home, the world was very different. Her stepfather, a man respected by many, had a side of him that only she knew. He could be kind and gentle at times, but there were moments when his anger took over. Moments that left her feeling small, helpless, and terrified. She had learned to read his moods, to anticipate the slightest change in his voice or his expression. She wore long sleeves to hide the faint bruises that sometimes appeared on her arms. She avoided eye contact when he entered a room, and she walked carefully, trying not to do anything that might upset him. Even though she was only 16, she felt like she had lived 100 years, carrying the weight of secrets too heavy for someone her age. At school, she tried to act normal. She laughed at jokes she didn't find funny. She joined in class activities and she answered questions in a soft, clear voice. The teachers saw a quiet, well-mannered girl. They didn't notice the way her hands trembled when she wrote in her notebook, or the way her shoulders tensed every time her phone buzzed with a message from home. Some of the older students noticed she seemed distracted, but they didn't ask. No one knew what to say. There was one place she felt she could almost breathe: the counselor's office. It was a small room with warm yellow walls, soft chairs, and a window that let in sunlight in the afternoon. Here she sometimes dared to whisper pieces of her truth. She told the counselor about the arguments, the yelling, the times she felt unsafe. She didn't share everything because she was afraid of what would happen if her stepfather found out, afraid that no one would believe her, afraid that asking for help might make things worse. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Her life became a careful routine of survival. She learned to smile even when her heart felt heavy. She learned to pretend her home was just like any other, that the scary nights were rare and nothing to worry about. But each day the fear grew a little larger and the loneliness a little deeper. She longed for someone to see her for who she really was, someone who could help her escape without making it worse. One evening, she sat alone in her room, her desk lamp casting a warm glow over her notebook. She had discovered a private online forum for teens who needed help. It was anonymous, safe, or so it promised. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her heart raced. What if someone discovered her post? What if it backfired? But the fear inside her had grown stronger than the fear of trying. She typed slowly, carefully choosing her words, explaining that she needed help, that she was scared to go home, that she didn't know what to do. She didn't include her name or her school, only enough details to give a clear picture of her situation. She posted the message and waited, her chest tight with anxiety. The night passed slowly. She tried to study, tried to distract herself, but her mind kept returning to the post. Hours later, she logged in again. There was a reply. It was from someone who called themselves Guardian Writers. They wrote that they had seen her message, that they understood, and that help could come. They didn't ask for her address immediately. They didn't try to pry. They simply said she was not alone and that she would be protected. For the first time in a long time, the girl felt a glimmer of hope. She replied cautiously, telling them a little more about her situation. She described the stepfather's behavior, the fear, and the bruises she tried to hide. She didn't know who these people really were, but there was a sense of strength in their words. They promised that nothing would happen without her consent, and that they had ways to make sure she stayed safe. The next morning, she walked to school with the same careful steps, but something had shifted inside her. She still wore long sleeves, still kept her eyes down, but a tiny spark of courage flickered in her chest. She began to notice small things: the way sunlight reflected on the leaves outside her classroom window, the gentle voice of her favorite teacher, the soft laughter of friends she had barely spoken to. These small moments reminded her that there was life beyond fear, that she didn't have to be trapped forever. Meanwhile, far from the quiet streets she walked every day, a group of bikers was gathering. They weren't ordinary bikers. They were part of a community that took care of those in danger, a group that had a code of honor to protect the vulnerable. They heard about the girl's post and understood the urgency of the situation. Meetings were held in garages and backyards, plans drawn on scraps of paper. Everyone agreed they had to act, but carefully, without alarming the stepfather or the girl. They needed to be fast, strong, and silent when necessary. The bikers learned about the girl's daily routines. They observed the school from a distance, noting the times when she left the building, when she walked down the street, when the stepfather would be at home. Every detail mattered. They wanted to ensure that no one else would be hurt, and that the girl could be removed from danger safely. The group's leader spoke often of patience and precision. "This isn't about making a scene," he said. "It's about giving her a chance to be free." As the days passed, the girl began to notice small, unusual things. Sometimes she felt the shadow of someone watching from afar. Sometimes she noticed motorcycles parked at a distance, engines off, no one around. She didn't know who they were, but there was a strange sense of comfort, like someone was looking out for her without her needing to ask. It gave her courage. She started to dream quietly of a life where she didn't have to hide, where she could laugh without fear, where she could walk home without her heart pounding. Inside the school, teachers continued their routines. They saw the girl as the same quiet student, unaware of the storm of events unfolding outside. Friends who had once ignored her began to notice her subtle smiles, the way her eyes seemed brighter some days. She still didn't tell anyone about the fear at home, but the invisible weight she carried began to feel slightly lighter. Something was coming, though she didn't know what. Something that might finally change everything. One evening, as she sat at her desk again, she noticed another message from the Guardian Riders. They were ready to act, they said. They had a plan to make sure she could leave safely, and they would be there to protect her. She read the message several times, her heart racing. Could she trust them? Could she finally take the step to escape the fear that had shadowed her life for so long? Her fingers trembled as she typed a reply. Yes, she was ready. She had no idea what would happen next, but she knew she could not stay silent any longer. The night passed slowly, and by the morning, everything seemed different. The sun rose over the quiet town, casting long shadows on the streets. The girl packed her backpack carefully, making sure she had everything she needed. She felt a mixture of fear and hope. She walked to school with her usual careful steps, but inside, she carried the knowledge that soon things might change. She wasn't alone anymore. She had people who were ready to protect her, to make sure she could live without fear. Every turn she took, every corner she passed, she imagined a life beyond the shadows of her home. She didn't know what the bikers looked like, how many there were, or what exactly they would do, but she trusted that they were real and that they cared. She thought about the strength it would take, the courage she would need, and the possibility of a future where fear did not rule her life. By the time she reached the school gates, her heart pounded in her chest. She felt the wind in her hair, the sunlight on her face, and a strange sense of calm. Today would be the day that her life started to change. The day when she might finally see a way out of the fear that had trapped her for so long. She took a deep breath and walked inside, unaware that outside the school a group of people prepared to act with courage, speed, and precision. They were coming for her, and soon, nothing would be the same.